How's it going? Welcome back to United View and welcome to the Tactical View. Manchester United have put in their best performance of the season against Nottingham Forest after going 2 goals down in the opening 4 minutes. But for the rest of the game, there was quite a nice recovery to both get the win, get the 3 points, but also tactically looking like the best that we've seen all year. Not that that's really an achievement given how bad United were at times against Spurs and against Wolves, but at least on the positive side, there is clear evidence of exactly what it is that Erik ten Hag is trying to implement. We'll be talking about what United did well, what United have still got to improve on, and why a lot of this stuff isn't actually tactical problems, based on this game anyway. It's a lot of individual errors compounding any slight issues that we've got tactically. But before we do any of that, before we talk about Bruno Fernandes's masterclass, Diogo Dalot being United's key man in a lot of different areas, we're going to look at the Forest team. So Forest set up in their usual 3-4-3. In terms of quality, as we know, there's not an awful lot in the Forest team, and defensively they're one of the worst teams in the league realistically, with individual quality lacking pretty much on every single line. Defensive line not great, midfield line not great, and the forward line is okay. I mean, there's a few players that can threaten. I do actually rate Morgan Gibbs-White, but outside of that, there's not an awful lot of quality. Now, the way Forest set up depended really on where the ball was for United, and most of the game really was with United in possession and Forest in their settled defensive shape. So we'll just talk about how that sort of looked from a Forest perspective. So when the ball was in United's third here, what we tended to see was a 5-2-3 from Forest. So the wing-backs were sort of dropping back into that back 5. You had the midfield 2 there, and you had a fairly narrow front 3 from Forest there. And as United advanced the ball up the pitch, higher and higher, what would happen is Aaron would stay up front, and Gibbs-White and Brennan Johnson would sort of tuck back in onto that midfield line to create more of a 5-4-1. Now, what was a little bit different was that Brennan Johnson struggled quite a bit with Diogo Dalot's position, because obviously Diogo Dalot was inverting quite a lot. So Brennan Johnson wasn't too sure whether to follow Dalot in field, whether to stay high with Awani and try and cause a threat to Martinez against United's back 3 when we were building up. And sometimes he was getting confused and going a little bit wider as well. So I think Brennan Johnson wasn't too sure what was going on tactically, and that's how the Forest lineup sort of worked. So if we match both teams up now, what we'll be able to do is have a closer look at how everything was going down. So let's get a ball on the pitch as well. As we said, with United in possession, what we tended to see, as we've seen all season from Erik ten Hag, was a pretty clear 3-2-5 system. So it tended to be a back 3. Often it was Wan-Bissaka, Varane and Lisandro Martinez, though in the second half Casemiro did step into the back 3 quite a bit, with Wan-Bissaka pushing on instead. And as we said, with the ball in the United's own third, it tended to be this 5-2-3 from Forest. So the front 3 were relatively narrow to try and stop any easy passes centrally. You've got the midfield 2 there and the wing-backs dropping back into that 5 at the back there. The way that United then played in front of that in terms of that 3-2-5 was you had Casemiro there, you had Eriksen sort of pushing in the half space there, Diogo Dalot coming in here. Sometimes him and Eriksen rotated, so Dalot will go a bit higher, Eriksen will come a bit deeper. And what you'd usually see is the wingers being really wide and really high. So I think this is something that Erik ten Hag likes to do pretty much all the time, is the wingers really wide and really high, with the aim of pinning the opposition's defence as deep as possible to give United that bit more space to build up there. Now, the reason that it worked so well in this game is obviously because the wing-backs there were sort of like direct opponents for the wingers on either side, which meant that realistically the rest of the defence couldn't really push too high up the pitch. The centre-backs weren't really too keen to get involved with dealing with the 3-man up here, so it just kept the defence nice and deep and ensured that, because obviously there's 5 players in that defensive line versus United's front 3, that meant United had more players everywhere else on the pitch a little bit deeper, so it was relatively easy for United to retain the ball there. Now, in terms of the way Forest defended, it was this that really made it a lot easier for United than it may otherwise have been. And what you saw was as the United got the ball higher and higher up the pitch, this sort of midfield 4 of Forest, and Awani as well, to be fair, were really, really passive. So they weren't really too interested in going and pressing, winning the ball back off United. They were more interested in just dropping deeper, getting numbers behind the ball, and even then, in these sort of situations, they weren't really offering too much resistance. They weren't really you typically tend to see when you've got a line of 4, when the ball goes to the direct opponent here, you see a quick jump out of there. The rest of them get compact nice and quickly to stop any balls coming through. But we didn't really see too much of that. Forest were very, very passive in midfield, and they made it very easy for United, because of that, to form our structure and get the ball up the pitch. So, in terms of the structure, just to sort of bring home the point and illustrate what we're saying about Erik ten Hag's philosophy, what he's trying to implement with United, what you can see is in this picture, you have got a very, very clear demonstration of that 3-2-5. You've got the back three there, Wan-Bissaka, Varane and Martinez. You've got Dalot and Casemiro in this particular moment. You've got Antony wide one side, you've got Bruno in the half space there, Eriksen in the half space there, Martial here, and obviously Rashford out of shot with Antony and Rashford pinning the back line there. And what you can see with this 3-2-5 is that because we've got that double pivot here with Dalot coming inside from left back, you've basically got this box in midfield. So that meant that for Forest, there was always pretty much a spare man. So you can see one on Eriksen there, you've got one on Bruno there, and you've got Brennan Johnson. In this instance, he's followed Diogo Dalot in, which means there's a really easy passing option if we transfer the ball out to Marcus Rashford on this side. But the point here is that United had a really good opportunity because of how passive Forest were to get the ball up the pitch and set this structure up exactly as Erik ten Hag wants. So I think in the opening weeks of the season, there's been a lot of discourse about how Tottenham are looking like they've got a real identity already under Postecoglou. And plenty of United fans are saying, well, hang on, Ten Hag's been in place a lot longer than Postecoglou. Why can't we see what he's trying to do? Well, actually, in the right moments, you can. What makes it a little bit more different or a little bit more difficult to see potentially at certain moments, as we show here, is that the structure remains the same, but the players occupying each role constantly change. So that possibly makes it a little bit harder to see and understand what's going on because a lot of things are varying. So, in this moment here, we've got Wan-Bissaka on the ball. Again, you've got that back three with Varane and Martinez. You've got that double pivot here of Casemiro, and in this moment, you've got Christian Eriksen there. You've got Martial, and you've got Diogo Dalot in the half spaces. But again, notice that the players have changed around. So before, this was Diogo Dalot, that was Christian Eriksen, that was Bruno Fernandes there. Now Bruno's basically in the number 9 role. But again, you've got the key principles of stretching the pitch, pinning the opposition defence as deep as possible, with Antony on one side, Rashford on the other side. And you've got that box midfield that we're able to create as a result. And you can again see where the free players are for United. So you've got that box there, Martial, Casemiro, Eriksen and Diogo Dalot. And you can see one's marked there. I guess Bruno's sort of marked there. Maybe he's dealing with Eriksen or Casemiro, but there's always going to be one free in the box. That's the point. And because Brennan Johnson's tucked inside there as the winger, if United choose to transfer the ball across the back, there is an easy out ball to Marcus Rashford. So, in terms of structure, it was really clear from United and it was much improved from the Spurs and Wolves game. And the reason for that was that because Forest were so passive throughout the game, rather than hitting long balls in the first phase from deep in United's own third, they were able to just walk the ball up the pitch and sort of take your time, get the whole team up the pitch, the whole team into the opposition half, and that gives you the foundation to set up this structure. So where Varane, Martinez, Wan-Bissaka, whoever else picked up the ball in United's third, rather than worrying about getting the ball forward straight away, it was much more patient from United. And at times, because the Forest players were just backing off, not trying to challenge, United defenders were just walking the ball up the pitch, slowly. I better not get too close because Josh will tell me off, but they're walking the ball up the pitch, and that gave everybody time to squeeze up the pitch as a unit, meant that we could get players closer together, so it's easier to combine, but also because you've got players close together, you can form the structure easily, and when you lose the ball, there's players around the ball to press quickly and win it back. So that patient aspect was much better from United, and it allowed us to form our structure, get the ball up the pitch, and it was enabled because Forest were so passive defensively, not really wanting to challenge, and that meant that United players could take their time, not worried about losing the ball, get their head up and move up the pitch. So I think this is one of those games where it's really important for United and really important for a team still trying to learn what they're doing in possession, so that they've got a lot of practice, a lot of repetitions of doing the right things, setting up the structure and be able to get basically a training session for 70 odd minutes of the same patterns, the same structure, just execute what you've been working on in training all week. So that was really helpful from United. And obviously, you add in a slightly faster ball pace as well when we did get the ball in these sort of situations to switch it from side to side. And that was the foundation really for a much better performance from United. Now, what I want to talk about from here, so that's the structure. What we're going to look at next is how United actually then move the ball through the lines. And what I really like here is somebody that United don't really have an answer for when he's not in the team. Anthony Martial. So, In this moment here, you've got the similar structure set up again. You've got that back three. Notice a familiar theme. I'll probably be banging on about it all show and probably all season, to be honest. So get used to it now. You've got the back three, you've got the double pivot there, Casemiro and Eriksen. Obviously Eriksen's a bit higher. And you can see from the way that the players are arranged that the ball's moved from this right side here over from Eriksen to Casemiro there, and it's being transferred out to the left side. Again, notice that Antony's wide and high to pin the defence back. You've got Martial in there. And you can see, because of how passive Forest are, you've got the Forest player here, I think that's probably OWEN, trying to put a little bit of pressure on Casemiro, but there's a lot of time there. What you should notice straight away here is this giant space that Forest have left there. Now that will be crucial, and obviously there's a giant space there, but the technical elements have to be right to execute it and exploit that space. And that is what Martial does better than pretty much anybody else in the Manchester United squad. So the second image now is just as Licha receives the ball here, and you can see Martial's beginning to recognise that space. He's sort of leaning forward. You can see he's starting to get into that space there, starting to make that run. You can see again, this is how Forest made it really easy. Midfielders far apart, no real pressure on the ball, so it's easy for United to walk up the pitch higher and higher and higher. And you can see Varane's the deepest player at this moment, well inside the opposition half. And in this moment, to form that back three, Wan-Bissaka's pushed up. Casemiro's dropped into it. So you've got that same structure, but again, that fluidity that we mentioned earlier. So you can see the Forest winger here, he's distracted by Diogo Dalot, who's out there, not really noticing that space that's inside him there, which is a little bit of a concern, although this one here should be moving across a little bit quicker to cover that space. So as we move it on, you can see Martial starting his run there to drop in deep. You can see here now, Martial's in that space, and what I like is that at this moment here, he knows what's going to happen. He knows Licha is going to give him the ball, so he picks this moment here to scan. He has a look round. Rashford's in the half space there. Diogo Dalot's really wide, pinning the defence, so a little bit of rotation there. Bruno in the other half space, obviously a little bit higher, or really, Bruno's the 9 there. And again, you've got the structure working around it. But the key point, Martial scanning really nicely to make sure that he's able to receive, and he identifies this is where the space is here, so that his next touch becomes very easy. It's taking in that information which is crucial. Now, it was pretty clear what was going to happen in terms of Licha giving him the ball, but as Martial drops in, as Licha gives that pass, look at how Martial's approached the ball here. So he's not just done a straight run back, because if you do a straight run in that situation, if you just run diagonally like that, it's very difficult then to turn your body around to play that pass forward. Instead, Martial's curved his run around, which means now that because Licha passes that ball into space, which you'll see on the next picture, rather than directly to Martial's feet, it's a really good pass into the space, into his path. That means Martial can then turn, be the glue and knit the whole attack together, connect that defence to that front line. And that is what United miss when Martial is not in the team. If it will let me go to the next one, there we go. There's the next image. So you can see here, as we've said, Martial's curved his run round. You can see he's opening his body out there really nicely so that he can play that pass forward rather than just playing it straight back to Licha. So it's that combination there of the two technical aspects. Number one, Martial curving his run, dropping it at an angle to make sure that he's got space to then angle himself to play that pass forward. He then opens his body out, opens his hips there so that he can play that ball into Rashford. And then the second aspect that's really important is Licha playing the pass not directly to Martial's feet, but he plays it into the space and with an appropriate weight of pass so that Martial can immediately play that ball forward into Marcus Rashford. So that is crucial, getting the technical aspects right, and that is why Martial's an important player for United. As we see this last image here, you can see that, look, there's 3 Forest players here being attracted to the ball, and Martial's still able to win that ball, win that ball, it's already ours, but he's still able to play that pass forward to Marcus Rashford there and knit the attack together, connect that defence to the attack. And that is what United are missing. So I think this game for me showed a lot of things about why Martial's crucial, but also it showed for me the problems that we have in midfield. Forest were really passive for most of the game, which meant that Casemiro, Bruno Fernandes, Diogo Dalot when he was in midfield, and Christian Eriksen as well, had a little bit more time. They didn't really have to worry too much about being under immediate pressure. And one thing I noticed about Bruno Fernandes is that when I think because he's so creative, he's always looking for that assist. He's always got his head up. He likes to keep the ball a little bit further out of his feet. So rather than being right underneath him, like you see maybe like a Gundogan would do, right underneath him so that he can react quickly, he can manipulate the ball as he needs to get out of pressure. Bruno likes to keep the ball just out of his feet so that at any possible moment, he can hit that killer pass as and when he sees the right opportunity. Now that's great in terms of when you've got a little bit more space, when your opposition in midfield are a little bit more passive, but as soon as you start getting intense pressure on you, that's when Bruno, because that ball's a little bit further away, he is a little bit more at risk of losing it, of being sloppy, and I think also when United are a little bit more stretched because we haven't been able to walk the ball up the pitch, that's when you see Bruno start to lose the ball, give it away, the ball retention starts to let him down a little bit. So we've talked about how Martial was vital for United to progress play through the centre of the pitch. We'll now look at how United used the wide areas and wide overloads in particular to create chances down the sides as well. So the right hand side for United was crucial, particularly with the play of Antony. So Antony, as we've seen, he's frustrated a lot of people so far this season because in big spaces when he's got a lot of the pitch to run into, he's not the quickest, he's not really got that burst of pace. But what he does excel at is playing in tighter spaces when there's lots of players around him. He's a really good passer in small spaces to split defenders and find gaps, and he's good at manipulating the ball to sort of stand up his man and buy that extra second for himself. So he's a little bit like Sancho in the sense that he works better in small spaces with runners around him, and that is why he looked much better in this game where United were camped high up the pitch and obviously as a result could get runners and people close to Antony rather than having him attacking big spaces in behind. If you look here, we've had Wan-Bissaka on the ball, just giving that pass out to Antony. Again, same theme as before, Antony and Rashford on the far side pinning the defence by staying really high and really wide to force that back five as deep as possible. You can see as that ball's been played, Aina's coming out to Antony. And you can see the near side centre-back in this moment in time is worried about what's happening on this side of the game. You can see Martial there is pinning the central centre-back, so the central centre-back can't go too far across the cover because of Anthony Martial there. So as we roll the image on to the next image in the sequence, you can see, once I get a pen up, yes, you can see now, so Aina's really bitten here. He's gone close to Antony to put the pressure on him. You can see you've got one of the midfielders there, and you've got the wide centre-back as well. You can see at this moment, he's worried about Wan-Bissaka. So you can see the midfielder's looking, he's got his arm up, he's passing Wan-Bissaka on to the centre-back, and the centre-back's a little bit unsure where he should be because he's got this space behind him to worry about, and he's also got this space in front here, and he's actually in this moment worried about Wan-Bissaka, and Wan-Bissaka attacking in there. So as we know, Ten Hag likes his fullbacks in particular to underlap when he's got wide wingers. So you can see Wan-Bissaka is making exactly that run. The key bit here, though, is that because this midfielder is worried about Wan-Bissaka, he's still negotiating whether to pass him on or not. Bruno Fernandes attacking this space here will become crucial later in the move. So as you've got the ball there with Antony still, you can see that Antony's done really well to hold the ball here for as long as possible. So Aina's come close, but Antony doesn't panic here. I think where a lot of United fans have been a little bit stressed about the fact that Antony isn't the best at exploding into big spaces and being really, really quick on the burst. He's really good at these situations where he doesn't lose the ball. That's really crucial because somebody like Marcus Rashford, for example, that has that explosive burst to attack the space, and other players like that are a little bit more direct, sometimes aren't quite as good when they stand up the fullback and they've got to try and retain the ball. Antony does a really good job here. Wan-Bissaka, what I really like here is that he's now worried this centre-back because he was worried about that space in behind there, and they're not really sure what's going on. So Wan-Bissaka, he underlaps here, but as he often does, curves his run back towards the touchline to try to open up space for Antony to go inside. Now that'll be crucial because as he's curving his run, you can see the midfielder's passed on Wan-Bissaka to the centre-back. That's going to drag the centre-back out of position, and you can see there, the midfielder is caught ball watching, and that is crucial there. Don't know why I pronounce it like that, by the way, but that is crucial because as the midfielder's caught ball watching, he tries to double up with Ole Aina dealing with Antony. Antony's still got that ball, it's just behind him, so you can't quite see it. You can see the wide centre-back's been drawn out. You can see again, at this moment, Martial's still pinning the centre-back there. He can't come across to deal with that space because he's worried about Martial. And you can see that as long as Antony's able to hold this ball, Bruno's potentially able to attack that space. So that is where Antony excels. And as you can see, as we roll the move on, I must have said roll the move on, and as you can see about 100 million times, but I think you get the idea. So you can see as we get this part here. Anthony's made that great pass there to Bruno. And the fact that he was able to split those two players when there's basically no gap. But we'll have a look at what happened before. Obviously, Bruno's got a nice potential pass in there to Martial, making that run. Wan-Bissaka's drawn the centre-back out there. And that's a really nice use of a wide combination and a third-man run from United to break Forest down around the outside. So we've seen how Martial was critical as the glue between the lines to progress play through the middle. This is how United attack down the wing. But the crucial bit here is Anthony in this image here. You can see there's not much space between those Forest players. And actually, this is just before Anthony lifts his foot to make the pass. The midfielder actually comes in closer, so there's even smaller, even less of a gap to fit that ball through. So I think as fans, sometimes we can get a bit frustrated and say that this player's not good or not this player's great. I think what we're seeing here is that certain players excel in certain situations, and when presented with those situations, they do well. But when presented with situations where they're not quite so suited, they don't do as well. So in previous games, when it's been really open, lots of space to break into, Anthony's not been great, but you get the ball high up the pitch, you make sure the team retains the ball really well, and Anthony will shine much brighter than he does in games when it's a lot more open. The same with Jadon Sancho, and you can see even Marcus Rashford had a nice impact in this game as well. So I really like that from Anthony, from Wan-Bissaka, and Bruno attacking the space there. It was a really nice use of wide combinations there, and Anthony was fantastic all game long. The other thing that I really like about Anthony is that in certain situations when Anthony's faced up with his fullback, let's go back to the original board here. So let's say we will say that Wan-Bissaka's on the ball out here. Anthony is really quite good at when the fullback's with him here, he's able to make a run in behind first, feigns that run in behind to force the fullback to cover the space, then he'll drop in to sort of create that separation for himself between the fullback and him so that he can receive the ball into feet and then do what he wants to do with it. Then Wan-Bissaka underlapping, does his thing, creates that space for Anthony to go inside, and that works really nicely. So what you've seen here is that if United can be more patient, more able to get the ball up to the halfway line and then start your attack, then start to punch the ball forward, it suits United's players much better, suits Anthony, suits Jadon Sancho, suits the players in the middle, and it ultimately makes it much easier not just to attack, but also to defend, as we'll see now. So, we've talked about in the first half of the show how, because Forest was so passive in midfield, United's players in that back three, let's say second half, it was Casemiro in that back three, a bit of rotation for you, live rotation on the tactical view. United were able to just walk the ball up the pitch. Forest just drop off, drop off, drop off, drop off. Got that box midfield in there with, let's say, we have got Wan-Bissaka in there for now with Eriksen. We've got Dalot and Bruno in the half spaces at the moment, Anthony and Rashford wide, and Martial as the 9. So United are able to just walk the ball up the pitch, walk the ball up the pitch, walk the ball up the pitch, and at times, United were almost 10-15 yards inside the Forest half. And what that means is that obviously it was easier to do because OWEN and the whole Forest team were just backing off, putting no pressure on at all. But these are the situations where technical players thrive because they've got players around them to combine with, really short distances. And shorter passing means two things. It means, number one, it's really easy to combine because players are close together, so you've not got to pass it 15 yards. They're 10 yards away, really easy to combine, bounce balls off each other. But also, crucially, if you do give the ball away, there's 3 or 4 other players in close proximity, so you can win the ball back quickly. And that's why, because United were more patient in attack, the rest defence was much better, and you could see the pressing was therefore much better as a result when United did lose the ball. And the key man in that was Diogo Dalot. This sequence, I love this sequence because it shows everything Ten Hag needs in the players that are operating in that pivot area, operating in midfield, and whoever's really the balance, the safety option. So, what's going on here is you've got Casemiro there involved in a duel in the box. Shock horror, he once again lost the duel in this particular moment for about the 50 millionth time this game. You can see in terms of structure, obviously Bruno's attacked the box, you've got Martial in there, Anthony wide there, Eriksen around the ball, but Diogo Dalot here is the key man. Watch him. Again, OWEN is here, so that's crucial. The Forest striker is so deep that United can get really high at the pitch. So Licha, Varane, and Wan-Bissaka or Casemiro, well, Wan-Bissaka because Casemiro is there, are 15-20 yards inside the Forest half, which means, again, United have got players close to the ball when it's lost. So watch what happens with Diogo Dalot. This is fantastic, and this is what you need to be looking out for in terms of United's press. So he sees at this moment that Casemiro is involved in that duel. And obviously in this position here, there's a possibility that Casemiro might not win the duel. Now that's not just because he was playing terribly and having an absolute stinker. Obviously that's always a possibility when you're going 50-50. But Diogo Dalot at this moment, he notices that there's that possibility and he sees Brennan Johnson here. He knows that's the threat. So whereas in a similar situation, Luke Shaw will probably be positioned somewhere there and maybe a little bit deeper, just out of shot, and he's a little bit too far away from Johnson. Dalot sees that Brennan Johnson's the threat if that ball's lost because he's a really easy pass for Forest to access. And so at this moment, he starts to go forward and put the pressure on before the ball's lost. So the ball hasn't even been lost, but Dalot's one step ahead mentally. And that is what's crucial here. You can see from his body position there, he's getting close, but technically, excuse me, getting too excited about it and coughing, but technically he's doing the basics right. So he's not just staying back, he's not sprinting, he's not keeping his longer steps, he's getting low. Once he's within 3 or 4 yards, this is exactly what any coach is teaching the players. Get low to the ground, get ready to react so that you can deal with whatever happens next. So he gets near Brennan Johnson quickly, and as that Forest player comes out with the ball, he's low to the ground, ready to get tighter onto Brennan Johnson as that ball gets played. But because he's low, he can react quickly and he can make sure that he challenges rather than getting sold. So in certain situations, you've seen United players, particularly Casemiro, in this situation, they're standing tall. All it takes is one little body feint, one little step to the side, they're out of the game. They have to stick a leg out. They look stupid. Dalot's low to the ground, so he's easily able to react. That is really nice. Also, Leacher here is really tight on his man, and that's what it takes to have a good counter press, is that you're anticipating before the ball's lost. So you can see here now, in this moment, Dalot's still low to the ground, on his toes, ready, so that as soon as Johnson wins that ball, Dalot's hands are on him straight away. As soon as he receives that ball, Dalot's on him, ready to make sure that he puts a challenge in to stop Forest countering quickly. And again, because United are high up the pitch, you've got Leacher in that position there, dealing with OWEN. You've got Eriksen around the ball. Casemiro is not a million miles away. Obviously, he's like moving around like an old man, so he's not going to actually help anyway. But you've also got Anthony close by. So this is the crucial bit. Because United got everybody up the pitch, attacking together around the ball, the rest defence was much better. Dalot's technique's brilliant. And when you get to the last image here, at least I think it's the last one, it is indeed, you can see Dalot is right on top of Brennan Johnson when he receives the ball. And in this moment, you've even got Casemiro recovering. Wow, didn't think I'd see that anytime soon. But because you've got Dalot right there, he does end up giving away a foul. But this is what Manchester City are brilliant at. It doesn't matter, really, if you win the ball or you give away a foul. Obviously, ideally, you win it, and then the Forest defence are disorganised, so you've got a better chance of scoring on the next attack. But as long as you make a foul, bring the man down, you kill the transition, and because there's players around the ball, rather than it just being Dalot there, it's not going to be a yellow card. Refs don't give that many cards away for that sort of situation when there's players around the ball. City get away with it all the time for that reason, and that is a huge step forward for United. So, whilst the game management from United was poor after going 3-2 up, there were a lot of positives to take from this. The first 4 minutes were obviously horrible, but the keys were getting the ball high up the pitch, being really patient in attack, just walking the ball up to the halfway line and then starting to attack. We played through the centre when we needed to, using the extra man afforded by the box midfield. We had Martial dropping in to link the play at times as well. Because Forest were so passive, Casemiro, Bruno, Eriksen, even Diogo Dalot had time on the ball. And because we had players in close proximity, the whole team was high up the pitch. Anthony looked good in ball retention, and the counter press was fantastic because there were players close to the ball when it was lost, meaning that it's really easy to sprint 5-10 yards and get straight on the opponent immediately. So that's the tactical view for this week. A lot of positives to take out of this. The bad news for United is that Arsenal are coming up on the weekend, and whilst the structure looked good against Forest, there are quite a lot of errors of execution. So we got players around the ball, but not everyone was using Dalot's good technique, getting low to the ground, dealing with the duels properly. People were sticking legs out, being rash, diving in, and against Arsenal, against a better team, that could cost us. Either way, we've got a special tactical preview coming up with James from AFTV, so look out for that later this week. And until next time on the Tactical View, see you soon.